Morning. Morning. So I'm Debbie Hoffman. I'm the co-founder of Symmetry Blockchain Advisors. And let me tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'll tell you about how we're going to utilize blockchain to gain our competitive advantage. So I started my legal career at a Wall Street firm. I was there for 10 years. And then I became general counsel of a financial services company. And as you can imagine, in both of those roles, there's a lot of documents. There's a lot of transfer of documents. There is quite a bit of audit trails. And so I'm always looking at technology and thinking, how can we utilize technology to better what we do? And in those roles, I've seen a lot of technology over the years. But when I saw blockchain, I'm getting chills, because honestly, when I saw blockchain, I said, this is a game changer. This could change everything I've done in my career and every person I've touched, every entity that I've touched, and we can make things so much better. So I left my company, and I started this company, Symmetry Blockchain Advisors, and I've begun to see how this, even more so, how we're gaining the competitive advantage. So I'm going to give you a quick example of what that means before I even go into blockchain itself. 5 years ago, in the industry I was in, it was in lending, financial services, we were talking a lot about, a little behind, but we were talking a lot about apps and customers using apps and getting loans and being able to use their phones to do anything they need to do, like we do with everything else in the world right now. But in lending, in mortgages basically, being able to pay your home payments, nobody was doing it yet. And so I would have these conversations. As I said, I'm always interested in technology. And I couldn't believe that nobody was really getting out there and saying, I'm going to be the first. But then I started talking to a few, I call them market movers, and they would say, oh, we have some pilot programs. And then you would go out to California, and there were all the fintech companies, and they're working vigorously. But then the question was the connection. When were the fintech companies and these market movers, when were we going to all see this come to fruition? So 2 years ago, during the US Super Bowl commercial, I don't know if some of you saw the commercial for Rocket Mortgage, and that really changed the industry. That from then on, we began to see people being using their apps. And so we also began to see the fintech companies partnering with the market movers. And all of a sudden today, in the US, there are not a lot of companies that don't utilize this technology. So that took about 5 years. So when I say gain the competitive advantage, 5 years ago, these companies that were gaining the competitive advantage, they were already working on it. It might not have been out there, it might not have been everyday conversation, but they were working on it. So that's what I'm going to talk about with blockchain today. So where can blockchain take us? How can we get that competitive advantage? And the only restriction is our creativity. We have creativity, we need to utilize it, and we need to be first, to be out there, to be talking about it. So we know we started 9 years ago. Everybody knows this, right? So there was this coin, right? And then what happened is the coin, the companies that took that one coin and utilized that one coin to make more coins and more tokens, they got the competitive advantage. So all of the companies that we know today, all of these currencies and tokens, a lot exist. And all of these companies are first, and they're getting the competitive advantage. Okay, and then what happens? Today, we see those coins and tokens have become utilized in all these different markets, right? We have, of course, homes being sold, and we have currencies being put on ATMs, and we have students are now asking for currencies to be sent, cryptocurrencies to be sent instead of fiat currencies. So now we're seeing all of these opportunities for creativity and these opportunities to gain the competitive advantage. So then what happens? Okay, so we have these wonderful coins and tokens. How can we utilize those tokens just through the blockchain, just through this decentralized technology itself? Well, I want to take a look at this decentralized technology. I want to take a look at what are some of the characteristics, and where do we see those characteristics that we can utilize those characteristics to gain that competitive advantage? So the most basic one we all know is decentralization. Why is that so important? We've heard it a couple times today. We know it's going to change everything. Why? Because it's peer-to-peer. There's no intermediary. And I'm going to give you an example of that. Why is that so important? I love music. Who doesn't love music, right? So when artists distribute music, they go through an agent, they go through middlemen to help get their music to their fans, right? But with blockchain technology, they can go right to their fans. How amazing is that? Speed and being able to bring it to their fans without that middleman, what a great competitive advantage those music makers can bring to their fans. How about records that are time and date stamped? How about that? Knowing all who touched my records. When I practiced law, if I went to a court of law and I didn't have to recreate who touched all those files, wow, that would have saved me a lot of time and a lot of energy. So lawyers are going to get the competitive advantage by using blockchain. How about we know it's all permanent, right? Seems easy enough, but how do you use that? Well, you have no audit, you have the audit trail. Again, when I go to my career and I think about I had to recreate my audit files in lending for every time every time we would have a regulator look, and not just for bad things, but just on a routine basis. I don't have to recreate. I'm getting the competitive advantage if I use blockchain for my files. And then, of course, we have the encryption and the fact that this is a much more secure way of doing things. I don't have to pour as much money into cybersecurity tools. Of course, we still have to utilize those, but it's just we're already a step ahead, all right, by using blockchain. And then we know it's a central real-time depository. How about that? So when I look at a document, I know it's not a copy. I know it's the real thing. Has anybody ever looked at a document before and realized it's an old version? We're not going to have that. We don't have to worry about that. So utilizing blockchain right there, we're getting the competitive advantage. And lastly, of course, there's the fact that this is one of my favorites, it's a ledger and a currency. I don't have to use the paperwork and then figure out how to pay. I'm already there. It's all in one. And we know that that's one of the beauties of the blockchain. And that creates so many opportunities, okay? So then what follows? We have all these fantastic traits, all industries. Bankers, lawyers, accountants, governments, entertainers, doctors, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Those are the ones that come to mind like just in a second. But all of these industries are trying to figure out how do we use this? How do we use all those to gain the competitive advantage? What can we do? So I'm just going to give you a tip of the iceberg, some more samples of what's been done and how we can take off from there. So all of a sudden there's this explosion, right? We know. In governments, there's records management and land records and regulatory reporting. So think about in Dubai, we know, and other countries that are using, that are going to put all their records on the blockchain for land management. Okay? And then we have, in healthcare, health records. Never again, if we use this blockchain, we have to write, how many times you go in the medical office and you have to write your whole history, right? And you spend 30 minutes writing that all out. You're not going to have to do that if we can figure out a way to utilize this across industries, and we use healthcare as one of them. In cross industries, I just said that, so smart contracts, purchase and sale is just a simple one, but we know that contracts go across industries, and so does identity. So we never have to worry again. If we use the blockchain, we're going to have identity structures built into them. Store of value is another one. I think there's a speaker later today talking a little bit more about that. And payment and transactions, moving money. So from the worker in one country going to another country, not having to use Western Union or wire transfers, you can do this on the blockchain. We no longer need that. And merchants and online stores, so the Amazons of the future there's not going to be payment processors. We're going to be able to do that all in one. And again, if you utilize all of these things, you're going to be ahead of everybody else. And insurance, proof of insurance. But there's more. It just keeps going. Because again, gaining the competitive advantage is, what did I say? It's only a matter of our creativity. So we have finance, we have trading platforms that are evolving, we have reporting, regulatory reporting, and AML and KYC. I think you heard about that earlier. We have all kinds of things going on in finance that are helping us. And in real estate, again, this is one of my favorites. There's so many opportunities in real estate, and we're seeing them emerge every day. I hear of a new one. I love the recording one. I love the fact that we're going to put this in land records. People have a little bit of a fear of that. We can talk about that in a minute. I'm going to talk about obstacles. But there's no fear. You put it in your land records, and the fear is we can't get everything historically. So start now and go forward, and then we'll figure out historically. We can go backwards. Transfers. There's been some testing of that in the U.S. in Cook County and Chicago. They've been testing how to actually do a whole transfer and get it in the land records. And there's real estate stock exchanges where anybody can invest on the blockchain for a small amount of money, and the next thing you know, they own a piece of a large commercial transaction, a large commercial building. And so anybody can own property because of the blockchain. Big pieces of property. You are now a real estate developer. You own a big piece of property utilizing the blockchain. It's an exchange. And in lending, that's where the industry I come from originally. So it's from lead generation to when you originate loans and you have to appraise them to you sell them in the secondary market and you put them into a servicing and you record and you audit. All of that go on the blockchain. And then in legal, we're seeing it being used. A lot of people give me use cases every day because they know I'm a lawyer. So we see in intellectual property, data storage, contracts, data integrity. I've heard a few new ones recently, but these are the ones that are out there, and companies using these are getting that competitive advantage. Okay, so I talked about entertainment. Grammatic says the blockchain gives him control over his work. So I'm going to come back to this. I want you to remember that we're using blockchain. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Again, the use cases are limitless. Okay, so what are the obstacles? What are the obstacles? Of course, everything else is all great, but we do have a few obstacles. Of course we do. So the biggest obstacle we have in using blockchain and gaining that competitive advantage is fostering that culture of learning and innovation. So a few people in the room have probably had that happen to you, naysayers. Well, this is the problem, that's a problem. I think let's start with the fact that people need to understand blockchain. If you're like me, and you talk about what you do, and you talk about blockchain, you've probably had people say back to you and say, oh, yeah, I know all about Bitcoin. You're like, that's great. I'm really glad you know about Bitcoin. And what do you know about everything else about it? What do you know about, blockchain is the underlying technology? That kind of thing. So making sure that we're not this small percentage of people that understand the value, because you're not going to get in your executives and the investors and the people that really make this amazing unless we understand what it is. The second thing is developing the infrastructure. So we're driving these cars on these dirt roads, right? Think about that music slide I just showed you, Grammatic. How many of you know this artist? How many of you, okay, good, there's a few of you. How many of you know Ed Sheeran? Okay, everybody, right? So one of the problems we have is we know that blockchain is a little slow, and it would break down if Ed Sheeran used it today. It wouldn't be able to hold that level. So yeah, we know we have infrastructure problems. We know we have power, right? Cost, speed. But that's not going to stop us. We're inventing the next, okay? And then, of course, this is one of my favorites as a lawyer, the regulators. Everybody says, what about the SEC? What about the FINRA? Or, I don't want to get into it, but the question is not about these U.S. agencies. It's global. This is fascinating because it's a global regulatory environment. So lawyers have to collectively figure this out. So in order to be competitive, we need to embrace this and know that we are going to be ahead of the regulations and not be afraid of them, comply with them as we know them today, and then comply and continue to comply and make changes as we need to make changes, but not be afraid of them. And I see a lot of people afraid of them. So be the innovators. Build the solutions and get ahead of the problems. And so the takeaways from this, two things. As you think about blockchain, think about where in your industry, where in your business, where and what do you do every day can you innovate? Can you make a change? And can blockchain help you? And then utilize advisors. I'm from Symmetry Blockchain Advisors. I'm going to give you a little bit about my background. And companies like mine exist all over right now. And what we do is we help you figure out where can you innovate and how can you make that change a reality. Okay? Thank you.